What I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about is mentoring program that me and a group of students and postdocs working with HBN have started to help facilitate and promote entrepreneurial activities that really bring together the Hopkins community and hopefully have some people come up with ideas and participate in pitches and workshops, etc. So what I'm going to do quickly is to give an overview of our program and then really get to the goals. And then Matt, who's my co-worker, will introduce our speaker for today, Cochran. We will have a nice discussion about ideation and hopefully open up the floor for questions. So moving along I don't really have a pointer here, but this slide here is really showing a quick overview of the flow of what HBN is really trying to do. And it's very simplified here. So really the key point here is we're trying to bring together a group of mentors and mentees from various schools at Hopkins. And the two key things we want to do here is a one-on-one mentoring, which is going to be set up online, which we're working on, as well as a series of workshops. That one of them is today, where we hope to accomplish at the end, and the goal is to have people successful in startup venture. So for our mentors, what we have, our strategy was to really go out and look for local specialists. For that we have JHU alumni from local Baltimore as well as elsewhere in the US. And some of the other groups that we're working with, university groups, are Innovation Factory from the Curie Business School, Social Innovation Labs, and we also work with the Tech Transfer Office as well as other groups at campus that are entrepreneurial. So really to set up some of the highlights of the program, and we hope to accomplish we'll be doing some topic-based ideation, and what I mean by that is this is a sort of an ideation strategy workshop, but in the next two, we will try to have some ideas and I guess potential problems in biotech or biomed, and have people brainstorm on how to take those ideas to really proceed to solving the problem. Then we also want to facilitate interdisciplinary team building, which what I mean by that is bring together students and postdocs or undergrads, trainees, everybody from different schools and programs to really help solve the problem. And we're also creating peer mentoring, and by that I mean there's a lot of, I just found out that we have a lot of students, even undergrads, that have successfully gotten startup funding, so they're kind of our peers, and a lot of them have offered to volunteer and come and talk to us and be part of our online program to help other students succeed in startup our entrepreneurial business. Furthermore, we're going to try and facilitate some activity to help people participate in business pitch competitions, and also lastly, it's also a great networking opportunity for everybody that comes to our events. So again, in the past, we just had an event on April 16th, which was the first series of events, how do we come up with an innovative idea. And today we're going to be talking about developing ideas and how do we evaluate feasibility. And in the future, we're also partnering, some of you guys might have heard about the JHU Bootcamp. So the organizers for the JHU Bootcamp are part of our mentor team, and they're going to be helping us along this ideation series, and we're also working with them. And then also another event that I encourage you guys to keep an eye on is the business model canvas. And this is, we haven't decided the location yet, but it's going to be either in Cary or the medical school. And this is going to be a workshop to learn to make a business model. So I guess we've already covered most of the goals for our program, so I don't want to go into it again, but how do you guys get involved? So if you guys haven't done it, the easiest way to get updates about our events is through our transcript, which is a newsletter that goes out, I believe, every 2 weeks. And if you sign up for the transcript, you keep getting announcements. And really, this list of things on the right is all things you guys might be getting exposed to if you work with us. And last but not the least, I want to acknowledge our team. So employee from all the groups of HBN. And Jane is not here. She's going to be the mentee point of contact. So everybody that signs up to our program as mentees will go through her on the screening and all the questioning. And Matt, who's here with me, he's the person that is the strategist behind the workshops that we do. So the conduct of the workshops and how we get speakers and stuff like that. He's the one spearheading that. And Angel, who's also, he actually lives in LA right now, is our part of our creative content team. So he's actually helped put together the newsletter and also as our West Coast liaison. So and also, of course, we want to acknowledge all our partners who have mentioned previously. And that's all I have. So I guess we'll get started with Matt would like to talk about today's event.
Sure. So, my name is Matt Marsatich, and I'm a e-board for the Hopkins Biotech Network. Also in the back is Amy Anderson, who is president of HBN. She's
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
So this is the second of two workshops as part of the Entrepreneurial Mentorship Program. The overall vision for it was to use Coursera-derived content, so freely available content, to kind of guide an informal and productive discussion with experts who are here at Hopkins. And today we're fortunate to have Mike Cochran from Johns Hopkins Healthcare Solutions. So if everyone doesn't have a handout already, please grab one. That handout is just a survey, it's background information to help you conjure questions while homework is updated. There's also a survey for you to complete at the end so that we get some feedback, and if we know we're doing a good job or if we should be doing something differently. So my background is in biochemistry and also public health and informatics. So I help develop open source software used for biobank management here at the School of Medicine. I have a Master of Public Health from Bloomberg, and I've taken some investments classes at the Trade Business School. So that's how I fit into the picture. So when you ask questions, please introduce yourself and say a little bit about where you're from, if you're a postdoc, if you're an undergraduate student, or if you have a really burning interest in tissue culture or what have you. So we're pleased to have all of you here. So with further ado, I'd like to introduce Mark Cochran. He's the Managing Director of Johns Hopkins Healthcare Solutions, and he has a doctoral degree in microbiology and immunology, a master's degree in microbiology, he was postbac at NIH, and through the Johns Hopkins Healthcare Solutions, he helps manage partnerships between Johns Hopkins and business entities. So, Mark, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. Nice speaking, Mike.
I just want to read the blackboard to see the.
Let's see.
Okay.
Is there chalk? Use chalk,
There
right?
is no.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm Mark, and I'm guessing you guys have a varied background. Just briefly, so I'm a scientist. I started life as a scientist, and somehow or other I ended up more in the business of science than the science itself. But it's interesting. Once you're a scientist, you are always scientists. You're always looking at data. You're always being critical about the detail of what it is that you see, and that's a strength that you'll always have. So even if you go into business, it doesn't matter. You still have it. It's imprinted. So, so Matt mentioned some of this stuff. I think what I want to talk about today is really, I love your word, ideation. I've actually never heard that before, so it's good. But I guess I used to call it innovation. And really, where innovation comes from is universities. That's where it happens. It doesn't happen anywhere else, really, other than here at these kinds of places. Industry, and so I worked in pharmaceutical industry, worked for Bayer, with Bayer, worked in Germany for a couple of years, ran a large group there, and then in California I ran another group and brought product to market. So I got the It's a recombinant DNA product. We licensed it from Genentech, recombinant factor A for blood clotting. And first recombinant product on the market that was approved by the FDA. Today, it's still sold and its sales are greater than $1 billion a year, which is great. So I don't get into that, but I'm still proud that I was involved in getting that to market. And it's that getting that gene, which was cloned by Genentech, which we bought, that process of getting it to the marketplace is a long, long haul. And that's pretty simple. I mean, that's very simple. It's a protein that clots blood. You isolate the gene, you clone it, you make a protein that clots blood. Perfect. But it took 10 years, 12 years to ultimately get that through. And that's simple. A lot of the other medications that people are working on since then and now are far more complex and take a lot longer. So I want to talk to you from the pharmaceutical perspective about innovation. I also worked a lot in biotech. In fact, after my postdoc, I started a company, co-founded a company in Connecticut. It's now called Protein Sciences. And what we did there was make recombinant vaccines. And this is, I think this is, I'm not almost ashamed, but I think it makes a point. So we worked on multiple products, lots of vaccines, and including one for AIDS, one for malaria, failed. One that did succeed was one that we started working on in 1986, 87. It was just approved last year. Okay, so just do the math. Patents, they're gone. They don't exist anymore. It just took that long. Why? It was a complicated idea. I think that's the message I can give you guys. Don't make it complicated, because the more complicated you get, the more you're just adding time. I mean, we're all in the business of predicting the future, but how far into the future do you want to predict? I mean, if you predict too far, you're never going to benefit from it. So the trick is to time what your idea is and when it's really going to become important. So that's partly with biotech, and I also worked in the venture industry. So once I learned what I wanted to learn from the pharmaceutical industry, I started working for venture capital groups in terms of looking at ideas from universities that could become companies. So that's it was a business that I was involved in. We started a little venture firm called NeuroVentures. We focused on neuroscience. And we started about 12 companies in the neuroscience space. Most of them failed. A couple are still surviving, so that's good. But that process was quite interesting. So it always starts at the university. And today, what I do is anything that we can turn value, turn into value. And this could be stuff that we do here at Johns Hopkins just by virtue of what we know, and that's called consulting. So we actually go out and find people who could benefit from what we know, and we set up consulting arrangements. We charge them money for it. We're doing that with Walgreens, doing that with Cardinal Health, doing that with Premier. And we charge them a lot of money because we know a lot of good stuff. It took a long time to get it, and they pay it because there's value. That's great. The other thing we do is look at internally inside of Hopkins things that we do that are kind of businessy, but because we're a university, we don't do it really well. And that kind of makes sense if you think about it. We're an academic medical institution. So we have, my group has pulled out some of these businessy things that we do, and we're working to turn them into real businesses that are more profitable and run like a business, not like a research group. And the last thing we do, and this is the part I enjoy the most, is that faculty members or people just like you guys from inside Hopkins call us up and say, we got an idea, and we think it's really great, and we think it's got great value. So I always take those calls, I always go, and I always meet with those faculty members. And to your point, that very first step, when you meet with these faculty members, I say it like this, very often they've got, first of all, they're always in love with their science. Okay, who wouldn't be? They're their children, and they love them dearly. The problem is, very often I have to tell them that their child is ugly because there's nothing there. There's nothing that can be commercialized there in their idea. What I try to do, though, is tell them why. You know, why is this not commercializable? Why is this not an idea that can translate into something that will actually make you money? And usually these are all smart people. You guys are all smart people. And when you learn a lesson, you go back, you think about it, and you reformulate. It's an iterative process. And I can tell you, when you start a company, you go out and, you know, literally you expose, you know, your inner self when you're describing what it is your idea is. People are gonna, you know, they're gonna poke at it, make fun of it. They're gonna challenge you. They're gonna do all kinds of things. And you gotta either be strong and what you're saying, believe in what you believe, which of course you will, but you also have to do some kind of iterative thing where maybe it's not as cool as I thought. Maybe I do need to make some changes, make some adjustments, etc. So those are some basic examples. When I was in pharma, actually the very first day I joined, they hired me because I was a biotech guy. This is a German pharmaceutical company, which means the chemists. Anybody a chemist in here? Okay. I love chemists, but they're pretty arrogant, right? Because they would say to me, in a German company, right? So they'd say, "Here, Dr. Cochran, you can teach a chemist molecular biology, but you can never teach a molecular biologist chemistry." Well, kind of brag, I guess, but it hurt. So they said to me, "Here's $1 million, literally $1 million. We want you to go out and walk through the corridors of various universities, and see if you can find anything that even has a whiff of any kind of activity or anything." This is early, you guys before you were born, but this was, you know, when biotech was just taking off. And I did that, and it was really interesting. And it was really interesting how immature universities were. They're very naive. They didn't really know how to transact a license terribly well. Certainly didn't know how to market, and that's true today. Still today, if you invent something and you go to tech transfer, and these are great people, and they will capture your intellectual property, a patent or some other appropriate form for what it is that you've got. But they're not very good at going out and telling the world about it and to find you a partner. That's up to you. You got to do that yourself because you're the best person to do it. Okay. You just take a pause there and ask if I touched on anything that anyone wants to ask me about, or anyone doesn't agree with, or anything that, you know, I can expand on.
Well, we go back to right after you started. You mentioned you were developing a couple of vaccines. Many weren't successful. One ended up being successful, but it was complicated.
Yeah.
I don't exactly understand the nature of a complicated vaccine versus the other ones.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe less complicated.
Don't want to get too technical, but you can take any drug, and if you're going to make the next generation of that drug, there's often multiple things you could do to make it better. If you do one thing, there's the risk of getting that accomplished is less than if you were to change 2 things, or 3 things, or 4 things. Because it's compounding risk. So what we changed was we used a heterologous vector. So instead of making a viral vaccine out of the virus that normally makes that protein, we used an insect virus. That freaked the FDA out. They just were completely, you know, how do we manage that? How do you, you know, what's the safety factor? And we didn't actually, we just made one protein in this heterologous vector. And that was another departure, because this is the one that was approved as a flu vaccine. So, pretty simple. But right now, it's flu. It's a virus. It's made manufactured in eggs typically. So we just took too many steps away from that to do it in 10 years. That's why it took 30 years, because we changed a bunch of things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So really, it's, here's another example. In venture capital, when you go to meet a company, very often they're smart business guys, and they'll say, all right, we have a platform, and our platform is for discovery, and we have 3 programs from that platform that we would like you, Mr. Venture Capitalist, to finance. And you go, well, we like your platform. It's really good. It's very interesting, it's very innovative, it gives you, it addresses large markets, and it's applicable across the board. We've got $20 million, but we only want you to develop one thing. Not 2, not 3, one thing. Pick your best, and we'll load the dice right on that. That's the bet. Now, from a business perspective, not smart. But from an investment perspective, it is smart. Because what you're doing as an investor, and that's what you need to think about when you go to these various groups. What's their game, right? The investor game is to have a portfolio of investments that are all high risk, and each one of those is going to be a swing for the fences. And you're looking for a return, right? And looking for a return has a multiple that covers the risk that they're taking in all the other investments. So in biotech, the success rate is typically 1 in 10. So if that's true, if it's 1 in 10, that means 9 fail and 1 succeeds. So if the one that succeeds gives you a 10-fold return, you actually haven't made any money. So you want to make a return of 100-fold, right? And so, but the only way you can do that is to really have each one of those companies do the Chris Davis thing, take a huge swing, see if you can get over the fence. So you're trying, as the investor, you're trying to win. You're backing, but you're willing to sacrifice companies who will fail because they didn't balance their company appropriately. Does that make sense? So anyway, it's a contradiction. It's one of those things that's difficult to deal with sometimes. Okay, any other questions? Yes.
You mentioned the 30-year process.
Yeah.
You come from the venture capital background.
Not proud of it, okay?
A necessary part of the process. So venture funds are, even though they weren't pushy, they recognize that some things take time. But not many venture funds stick with their investment for 30 years.
No, nobody made money on that. Nobody made money in that company, really, other than not. Some investors would count. So when do you invest? Okay, so the persons that stood that company up and made the investments 30 years ago, they did not make money. The guys that invested a year before the thing was approved made money, right? Because you always need investments, and so it's picking your time, and your return is commensurate with the risk, and that's kind of how it goes. But it's also commensurate with, the market and all those things too. That's another subject, but it's another fine balancing.
But how do you go out for 30 years and say, the last 29 years I haven't made money, but this is the year?
Talk really fast. But you can. So the way that company survived was really by doing a lot of piecework, a lot of contracts, a lot of just survival. Got some NIH contracts, got some DoD contracts, etc. And used that just to keep things marching forward. you have to run a business within a business sometimes for the big goal. Anyone else? Okay. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so 30 years, what was that regulatory kind of conversation like?
That was
throughout
horrible.
that time?
That was horrible. So it was, it was back and forth, back and forth. So we first had to, when you're cloning DNA, you're creating an entity that is a new entity. So the agency wants to know everything about it. They want to know the pedigree of the source DNA, where did it come from, and what did you do to, insert it, and you want that, you got to sequence the whole damn thing. And you have to show, that basically, every vial product you ultimately produce is going to be the same as the first one. And that gets right down to that specific molecular level. There's going to be some heterogeneity because of errors, etc. But we just had that regulatory process was really in the area called CMC, that's chemistry manufacturing controls, just to show that we could, in a replicative way, keep producing exactly the same thing again and again and again, prove that it's safe, prove that how do you know it's safe? You have logic, but you have proof. And so there's just all kinds of things. So it was just, and the agency, the FDA, great scientists there. By the way, great career path. And I'm very open to advising anybody of that too. The cool thing about doing what we do is you can do a lot of stuff. You don't just have to stick in the lab. You can follow many, many tracks, and many of them are quite rewarding. And the FDA is one of them. And a lot of colleagues that went as scientists into the agency and got right into review of drugs, et cetera, and after you do that for a while, you get your card stamped, right? Now you can go out and become a consultant to companies and take things to the agency, as an example. And there's all kinds of other ways to follow. But it was interesting. That's all I can tell you. It's an adventure. Okay, how are we doing time? Okay. Let me, okay, here's a trick I use all the time, and it's reasonable, but I think it also goes to your process. Whenever I meet with a professor who's got this wonderful idea, and I'll talk and talk and talk, and I'm struggling to, what is the idea? What is it? What is it? What is it? And I get that they're passionate, and I get that it's really smart, and I get lots of things, but I still don't know what it is. What is it? So I say, I think I like this. I'm not sure, but I need to discuss it with other people. Could you please reduce what you just described to me to one page? Right? And send it to me. And 9 times out of 10, I never heard from them. Because they can't reduce to what it is. And that goes to the very point I made at the beginning, keep it simple. But you're not going to be able to develop something if you cannot describe what it is. It's sad, but as smart as you guys are, the investment community, don't forget, they'll hear proposals dozens a day. I can tell you since when almost every year for 20 years, I was looking at 500 proposals per year. And just again and again and again. And I got to know how to read them pretty fast. And if it didn't grab me, nothing happened. So again, it's being able to reduce in a very concise, meaningful way what it is. If you're working on a drug, great. Composition of matter, great. Is it a first generation? Great. What's the market? That's the biggest problem I had. Remember that $1 million? So I would go and I'd find Professor so-and-so that had this very cool thing that did something. And I would ask him, well, what could you use this for? And you know, it would be really good at growing cells or something. But I would try to, well, what disease could you actually use this for? We'd have a discussion. And I would push them to come up with an indication. Pharmaceutical companies, Western medicine is all about indications. That's one disease, one drug. It's interesting, Chinese medicine is not like that, but Western medicine and our whole regulatory system is all built around one disease, one drug, which is actually not how our body works, I believe. That's why it's getting harder to do what we do, because the low-hanging fruit's already been picked in many cases. Anyway, so let's say they, and this is a practical case, they would have something that might be good for cystic fibrosis. Okay. So I would go to so I would talk to my bosses and go, I found this guy's got a potential treatment for cystic fibrosis. Really? Well, what's that worth? I don't know. It's a disease and there's a treatment here. It could, and so then I'd have to go talk to the marketing guys. These are tough, these are very tough people. And they're the ones that ultimately can say to me what it was for. This is a disease area that X hundreds of thousands of people have, and currently this amount of money is sold into, or product is sold into that marketplace and it makes this. The product that you're talking about has a market potential of, and then drum roll, and then come back and say $10 million. And that would be a non-startup, right? And back when I did this, it had to be 400 to 500 million per year. So these guys were hard to convince. But if I didn't have their green light, it didn't matter what the professor had, it was dead. Had to have, and that's what I call the market pull. You have to have an unmet medical need in the marketplace that's large enough to support what work it is that you're going to do, all the costs you're going to put into it. Okay? And that's hard. So what is it and what's it worth? and if you get those two things, that's huge. That's a big, that's a starting point right there. And then you got to connect those pieces. Funny story, I found it so difficult to excite those guys in marketing with anything I came up with. It was frustrating as hell. And you know, this is when I was ultimately in California, and I had to fly to Germany and make my case, and they beat me up, and you know, I'd go home, I'd be all depressed, and come back, and get beat up again. And so one time I went to, and my job was global. I used to go all around the world, all these universities. It's great to find stuff. So I went to Israel once, and went to every research institute in Israel. It took 3-4 days, and found all kinds of neat stuff. And the one thing I did find, which I thought was bogus, but I won't get into details, but it was apparently something that would be used to treat a condition called erectile dysfunction. And I thought, is that a condition? I mean, what, you know, and I thought this, it just didn't strike me as a necessary thing. But I took it to the marketing guys, they went crazy. They just went nuts. And the numbers they showed, I couldn't believe the numbers they showed. It was huge. Anyway, that was how Cialis was born, right? The other thing I didn't mention that I really should is, for me as a scientist, the science has to be really good. And if the science is not good, forget it. And this is a bias that I have, and I'm guilty of whatever discrimination you might accuse me of, but as a rule, you have scientists and then you have medical doctors. scientists work in populations and work with numbers that give you statistical relevance of meaning. Physicians work to cure a patient one at a time. So they'll always talk to you about anecdotes and to say, I had this patient once, I did this. As a scientist, I go, so what? What does that mean? That's not really science, that's an experience you had. What is it that you... So it's curious, you will get a lot of docs, and I work with them every day now, you know, who have ideas, but it's not science. It's just, and I'll challenge them. You gotta make that into science or else forget about it. I don't know if you're following what I'm trying to say, but it's a subtle thing. And there's docs that just don't get that. But it's science enough to not forget. Now, if you want to make money, sometimes it doesn't matter. The science can be bullshit. And I've seen lots of companies making a lot of money on terrible, terrible science. And it's funny, that's probably where I made most of my mistakes of not making money because I said, well, if the science is no good, forget it. But I kind of missed the point. But, oh yeah, but it's snake oil. I mean, I hate that stuff. I mean, people will pitch snake oil and fail. I'll give you an example. You know, in case, I hope I don't offend anybody, but a company called Neurochem is working on an Alzheimer's drug. Wow. Alzheimer's, great. If you can come up with a cure for Alzheimer's. But the basis of their science was totally bogus. But the investment community was so excited about the potential value of an Alzheimer's drug that they just poured money into this, and the stock price kept on going up. And what the company did that annoyed me is that they would do trials to test this, but they would sub-power the trials. So you would never really know. I knew immediately when that trial was done, they wouldn't know anything. But Wall Street would say, trial says that it looks like it's still going to work, right? But the trial didn't prove it. But they deliberately did that. Until finally they couldn't really, they kind of got back to the corner, did a pivotal study, and then crashed. The company's gone. That's and there's many other examples. So science has to be good. Yes.
So, just to go a little bit deeper into how to evaluate the science. So, like, I've been looking at a few patents, and so the way technology transfer works right now is that any scientist who goes to technology transfer says that this is something I think is very good and patentable.
Yeah.
The technology transfer office will do their job, do their due diligence, and they will get the patent, or the patent application. But what I've found is it's very hard to understand if the patent, if what is being patented, it's actually of merit. Even if there are papers which are linked to it.
Yeah.
Like I've seen Nature papers linked to patents, which are very hard to navigate and really come to the thing that they are patenting. So if you could shine some light on that.
So to me it's a scientific process. You make a discovery, you publish it gets peer reviewed, gets published in a good journal, that's a good start. There's some validation. You have to capture the intellectual property, file something before you publish that. That's why the tech transfer group really can't give it a lot of due diligence beyond what the professor tells them, or the discoverer tells them. But it's really, so here's an example. Met this company, another Alzheimer's drug. I'm interested in Alzheimer's for some reason. So these guys had this kind of out there hypotheses, and they had some reasonable science to support it. And I just wasn't sure. So actually, this was before I came here to Hopkins. There was a doc here named Don Price, Alzheimer's expert, brilliant guy. So I brought the scientists that founded this company, and I sat them down in front of Don Price. And I said, talk. Tell them what you think. And Don just challenged them. And when they were done, they left. I said, what? What do you think? And he goes, they might be right. I don't know. But it was based on that, and we made it an investment based on it. Because at least it didn't make him vomit or gag or anything. That was key. But it's just something that you just got to probe. And I'll have to tell you, the institution that the science comes from goes a long way. But I've seen some pretty awful science from some pretty good places. So you really got to look at the person, what their pedigree is, what they've done before, and you got to check it out. I mean, one doc I worked with at a particularly good institution really had some very interesting drugs, and we found out later that he had discovered he had discovered drugs. This guy that he had postdoc for had, and had filed patents, yet the tech transfer group never picked up on those patents. So there's all this prior art. Don't trust, no tech transfer group can give a thorough, prior art search on patents. They'll do a quick thing, but it's not comprehensive. So most investors will repeat that, and they'll do it using stronger databases, because that's embarrassing. I mean, after you've written a check, and you've got everybody excited, you start about the company, you find out it's all bogus. Another thing too, it's interesting, and I'm sure you guys are all thinking about this. A lot of scientists have the vision of making a discovery and capturing it, starting a company, and being the CEO of the company, and going out and raising it and becoming quite wealthy. It's great. Now, investor comes along, and the first thing as investors you go, we got to get rid of the scientist. He's not a CEO. He has no management experience. He's never done this before. I can't raise more money with this guy or this person, masquerading as a C-level person. The other thing investors say too is got to get rid of the university, because universities often will try to have an equity position, but their value has already been spent. They can't give you further future value. Sometimes there are scientists that can miraculously become great CEOs. There's a few examples. So a trick I used to do, and I did this with several times. There was this venture guy who was really neat. His name is Jonathan Ruth. He worked for U.S. Venture Partners, a big fund in Sand Hill Road, California. And whenever I had a startup company that was run by the scientist, I would present them to him. And he was an MD, and he would ask all kinds of hard questions, but he would do it in a kind of a vicious, mean way. Like, he challenged the science, even though, what I was looking for was how did the guy react, because that's what it's going to be like. How did that executive react? So one guy was an Italian from Naples, and I think he almost drove across the table to strangle this guy because he challenged his results that were published in Nature, and he was just furious. So I knew, okay, it's not going to work with this guy. But then others did great, and which kind of made me think, okay, you've got a handle on this, and you've got what it takes to go out and ask people for money. All right, please ask questions.
So if you're trying to figure out whether or not something's valuable, you're doing market sizing. As someone that's not part of the marketing team,
Yeah.
you're doing your startup. How do you access all the resources?
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways you can do it. Here's a couple of tricks. If you can reduce the application of your invention to a particular disease or disease area or diagnostic, well, the diagnostics are great, but they're about 1/10 the value of pharmaceutical. And transaction deal sizes are about the same. Devices are sort of in between. The risk associated with devices is actually pretty good. But again, you have to look at what the size, the whole size of the applicable market is. Where can you get that? Here's the tricks, two tricks. One, if it's, let's say it's diabetes, or let's say it's some particular disease, find a company that's got a product, a publicly traded company, that's got a product in that space that you're thinking of going after, and access an analyst's report on that company. And every year or so, an analyst will drill down on the company's market assumptions and value or not. And you can get some great data that way. Sometimes these analyst reports cost you money, but some of them are free. You can get them. Even if you have a bank account at some bank, sometimes you'd be surprised you can get an analyst report from your bank for a particular company. Another source, and this is even more important these days than ever before, patient groups. So patients that are suffering with whatever disease, epilepsy, schizophrenia, any condition, they form these co-ops really of families, friends, etc., and they will put forward facts about how big the market is. They'll do some of that homework for you. So those are quick ways to get an idea. And we're not looking for a number that's so precise. Is it 10, 9, 20? 10, is it 50, is it 100? That kind of chunk size. You don't need to get too precise, but it's order of magnitude that people are looking for. So if you need to take something through the FDA, what's that going to cost you? 30, 40 million bucks over a certain period of time. Your product has got to have ultimately a value much greater than that. The other thing too is that, and marketing people are often approachable, and I've learned a lot about it just by virtue of being beat up all the time by marketing people. But what they do is they define an entire market, and then they just define how one penetrates that market. So another little trick I learned is that when somebody says the addressable market for this disease is, $1 billion. Okay, that means that everybody in the world that has that disease who's given this drug, there'd be $1 billion coming to you. Okay, what's your penetration rate going to be? Okay, now we never see penetration rates greater than 30% in the drug business. So that what did I say, 1 billion or whatever it was, it's going to be 30% of that, and that's the whole world. But are you talking U.S.? Okay, so the U.S. is about 1/3 of the global market. So take another third of that. Sometimes your patents only cover the U.S. That's what the universities will do for you, just capture a domestic IP. So again, you've got to think, if your market that you want to go after is global, then you got to capture a lot of property protection, globally. Otherwise, it gets complicated. Anyway, does it help you? Anything else?
You talked about the long process.
Yeah.
There's a regulatory component, and there's clinical research that you have to do. You want to do independent of the regulatory component. What are the top two most time-consuming parts of the process in your experience?
Depends on the drug. We used to just do it by the book. Phase 1, safety, and maybe a little bit of dosing. Phase 2, what I used to like to do is to advance into a phase 2B quickly, and if possible, make it the stuff quickly. So the most time, well, it depends on the drug, but really the rubber meets the road when you do a pivotal study. That means double-blind, placebo-controlled. Don't know what drug you used. It doesn't work. And I've been involved in so many. Actually, I can tell you 20 trials, most of which have crashed around that whole pivotal thing. Some of which we stopped prematurely. buyer was working on an anti-TNF. We killed it because we thought it wasn't working. Guess what? It worked. By our competitors because we stopped our program. I'll tell you a quick story about pivotal study. We were working on anandamide. This is a natural, THC-like drug that our bodies make, and we have receptors for it, etc. And it does all the things you'd expect. It can make you feel good. It makes you hungry, and I think it makes you sleepy too. But those are the key things. So we thought, okay, what's an addressable market for this? So we thought pain. Pain is good, right? Pain is a very hard clinical endpoint. And so what kind of pain? Well, so we picked hepatic neuralgia, which is this generalized pain that people get that can keep them awake. Some people will have, because nerves grow right up into your skin in a very dense way. Some people have surgery to either remove that skin so it doesn't hurt as bad. Anyway, did a double-blind placebo-controlled study. I'll never forget, this patient comes up to us and says, I have never felt better in my life. I have slept, ever since I've been on this drug, I have slept every night. And thank you, this is fantastic. You're thinking, sounds like they got something. Finally, we broke the code. The patient's on placebo. And the placebo effect in pain studies is really high. It's 40%. And because people, there's a mind component to pain, no question. So again, I don't know, sizing your study appropriately is a big trick, especially if you don't have placebo effects. Other questions? Yeah.
So I was wondering, sort of as a starting point, if you're working on some interesting bit of science and you're curious what prior arts exist, or if something you're working on has been patented, how would you go about finding that out? Like if you're someone in our position, like you're a trainee.
So, yeah.
Would you need to go talk to your tech transfer office and hope they take you seriously?
Yes. I mean, my assumption with any startup company is that they have no money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to do a proper job is going to cost money. Proper prior art review can cost tens of thousands of dollars through a legal firm. So your tech transfer group has the ability to go deeper, and so that's the thing. If it's a concern, I mean, if you will know based on if it's a compound that you're working on. Others have gotten kind of close to the structure, a little bit worried about, if you feel insecure about it, then push them to dig deeper. But if it's such a novel, out-of-the-box construct, I wouldn't worry about it so much.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just when those, when things start looking a lot like other drugs, that's when you have to do a proper job.
So how do you protect the idea itself? Like your idea, which thinking, why are you thinking to different take transfer or
Yeah. So that's the thing. So you have to be able to define exactly what it is. If your idea can be reduced to, so there's several types of patents, but there's two types in general. Those that are entities that represent a composition of matter, those are actually the easiest ones, where you can say, this is it, this is the it. It's this tangible piece of material that I've made. If it's a method, and method patents are complicated. It might be a brilliant way of doing something in a better way where it's more efficient. I just finished a litigation with a company with another flu vaccine where we had a process patent, and we know one of these companies is using it, couldn't prove it. Because it's hard to get inside and to take apart their machinery to look at stuff. That's hard. So, to answer your question, you just got to define what it is that you have That's the first thing I look at when I hear someone's idea. I go, is this novel? Can anybody do this, or can you protect this? So there's a lot of, and it doesn't, if it's not novel, it doesn't mean it's not a good idea. The world I'm dealing in now is not drugs at all. It's ideas, it's practices. And guess what? I don't use patents. I use our name, Johns Hopkins. That's how I protect things. So when I have our faculty member that say we have this method of managing cancer patients who are still at work, listen to it and go, well, that's nice, but anybody can do that. It's true. But nobody else can have a program called Johns Hopkins Managing Cancer at Work. So that's how I protect it. And that's what we sell. We sell on brand. And that's a quick, and it's 30 years, forget it. Now I'm talking, 18 months. And now we start making money. So that's, don't just limit yourself to, that golden fleece of the new drug that's going to cure cancer. It might be an idea if you can capture it through some kind of brain. Because the last thing, sorry, running time, the most important thing, never forget, we're good at innovation, really good at new ideas, lousy at development, lousy at marketing. So, partner, find a partner. Find someone who knows how to do what you don't know how to do. And if I'm an investor, and I come in and I look at your drug, and you tell me, oh, by the way, I have an arrangement with Merck to do some further studies on this, I go, where do I send the check? Because they have validated exactly what it is that you like. So, and that's my best advice is to, once you figure out what you got, who's the best group that you could possibly work with, and you go sell it to them. You sell your idea to them without giving it away, of course, but, which can be tricky. But as soon as you can, partner. All right. Okay.
So regarding the partnering thing,
Yeah.
so how do you, what do you look for in partners, and how do you evaluate?
Yeah, well, it's, there's these things called partnering conferences. And I used to participate, I hated them, but it's speed dating. So you go to a conference and you got people with ideas and you got people who need ideas. And typically it's pharmaceutical, it's biotech, it's investors, and it's guys like you. And what you do is you publish what your idea is in an abstract, very brief description. And you say what it could be used for, that very brief description. And it's a great exercise because it's done, through technology. So you end up with a series of dates, 15-minute sit-downs with people who are potentially interested in writing you a check for what it is you have. So Bio runs one. Next meeting's next month in Philadelphia, and that's the biggest partner conference I've been to. It's a zoo. And the rooms are just little curtained off rooms. It's not nice. But then you can hire class partnering where it's done in Europe and there's hotels and all that stuff. The same idea. So I always say, if you're working on, let's say we're in a diabetes drug, who's the leader in diabetes? Is it AstraZeneca, or is it Novartis, or is it I forgot the one that actually is. Whoever that is, and you pick three of them, the top three, and you figure out a plan to get it to. And I've used every trick in the book to get it to. And you can usually end up having a conversation. Because now these companies have business development groups. Before they had one guy, they got armies of them. Well, yeah.
So let's say you have a biomarker that is used for diagnosis of disease.
Right.
Well, it's a gene, it's a biomarker. How do you really patent that? Because in the US, you're not allowed to patent a gene.
But you can patent the use of the gene. You can patent, how it's. So you just got to think past. Don't let silly little laws stop you, right? Just think of something clever to do with that gene. maybe you put a reporter, it's kind of a reporting molecule, patent that. But in claim 1, say method to indicate presence of this. And if you get that granted, that's a really strong claim that if somebody's using a different marker, because your claim 2 is then describing what that marker is, you have a means of parlaying value. So you just got to think about how best to use it. Problem is that, when you look at patent claims, the more specific they get, the less valuable they are because you're kind of working yourself in a little corner where people can step around and do something different. But I love big, broad, general claim ones. That's what you can after.
So you talked about physicians that you work with that give you tons of anecdotes,
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah.
What process do you ultimately employ to collect that information? Because
Mhm.
it's still information. Is there still
Yeah. So
some kind of association, some kind of theme that can be?
yeah. So that's what I love about Hopkins is that our docs are physician scientists, and that's the best part. So they understand the value of doing proper study. So I don't see it that much here. I see it lots outside. But here, so the answer to your question is do a proper study, publish it in peer-reviewed journal, so that you get some validation to what your argument is. In fact, that's another thing we do is people will have these ideas, propose it. It could be someone from this group or outside, and we talk to our docs. And so how would you, we'll set up a clinical study. We need somebody to pay for it, but we'll set up a clinical study that asks that question in a very controlled way. So we have a product called Energy, weight loss program. It's crazy. But we did a controlled study, published in the New Journal of Medicine, and it's a product today. It's a new proven weight loss program that's in the market. It took 3 years. Yeah? Anybody else? It's been very nice meeting you guys. I've enjoyed it. And I love doing this kind of stuff, so thanks for the invitation.
So guys, if you don't mind filling out the survey forms that you picked up, it's really helpful for us for evaluating these courses. This is the first time we've run this series of workshops, so everything you tell us is going to help make it better the next time we run it. And you can just leave it on the table up front. So, thank you all.
I'd like to say that as we progress through the workshops, what we are hoping to do is mentioning is not a goal, it's to build teams. And because in further series of workshops are all going to be like team building activities, like business model one will have. I've done it once, so I know how it works. Essentially, put a group of people together in a room. So we're really hoping that through these, so we're trying to hold these workshops on different campuses so we can get more people. And what we're going to try and do is send out some kind of questionnaire of trying to get, and hopefully people will find partners like we just talked about and come back, and so please use this opportunity to get to know each other and hopefully work together in the future. All right. That's all I have to say. And thank you all for coming. It's great to have everybody here. Hopefully everybody learned something. And please, like Amy said, please fill up the feedback forms so we can all see what you guys are interested in learning.